This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Do you want to know a powerful question that you can ask yourself every time you react to something? Here it is. Am I responding this way because it's necessary or because of a past experience? Ooh, and here's one more to take it even deeper. Do I believe my response is justified because it's absolutely true or because of my past experiences? Can I be real with you for a second? Almost all of the time, your reaction is heavily influenced by your past. Our experiences, especially from childhood, shape a huge part of who we are today. Memories, beliefs, habits all get deeply rooted in our subconscious minds, and then they control our actions and our reactions more than most of us even realize. It's like this hidden force guiding our choices and behaviors, and we're not even aware of it. But here's the good news. Becoming aware of this starts to loosen the grip your past has on your present and your future. Notice I said loosen and not eliminate completely. My personal goal in this lifetime is to become as sovereign as possible. And in case that word has you Googling, sovereignty means having inner power, independence, and self-control. What I love about this idea is that it covers a lot of ground, like making choices based on your true self, not outside pressure or conditioning. Managing your emotions and thoughts instead of being controlled by your programming, keeping your peace no matter what chaos is happening around you, and being kind to yourself when you make mistakes, because anything else leads to a spiral straight out of sovereignty. There's a saying that goes, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And to me, this is what sovereignty is all about. I imagine this concept of standing for something like one of those inflatable tube men at car dealerships. I used to be the version that was flailing all over the place, but when you fill him up with substance, like values, dreams, and motivation, he stands tall and strong. Before I took the time to really define myself, what I really wanted out of this life, what's important to me, I would just kind of blend into my environment. I once dated someone who seemed to have a really clear sense of who he was. His desires felt more important than mine because I didn't really have many of my own. I wanted to be loved, so I tried to become the person I thought he would love. Or when I'd hang out with new groups of friends, I would start liking what they liked and listening to what they listened to. Sure, I had things that I liked and wanted, but I didn't put in the time or the energy to make them more than just passing thoughts. So when I was around someone who knew what they wanted, my desires just blew away in the wind. But sovereignty is about more than just knowing what you want in life. It's also about not getting knocked off course by your triggers, impulses, and patterns. And that's what we're discussing today. Our guest is Dr. Emma Seppälä. She's a speaker, author, and lecturer at Yale University. She's known for her expertise in the science of happiness, emotional intelligence, and social connection. She wrote the book, The Happiness Track, and her latest work, Sovereign. So 3 key things we will learn are the true consequences of external validation, how to shift from time management to energy management, and how your relationships reflect yourself and how to break the cycle. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777.
Behind every perfectionist or high achiever or is an experience of conditional love. Right? At one point you learned, I will only be loved if, right? We can learn that very young as a kid, right? And with that means that you go through your life shape shifting into anything that you think others will accept. And in the process, you're sacrificing your own self.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So, what inspired you to write an entire book on the concept of sovereignty?
So, I wrote my first book on the science of happiness. I grew up in France where people tend to be pretty grumpy and kind of see things negatively. And then I grew up, and then I came to the US for college, and I was like, oh, people are really positive here, which I like better. But I also saw people that were just driving themselves into the ground with work. And there was like a type of suffering there. And then I lived in China after college, and I saw people who had nothing and were grateful for everything and were so freaking resilient. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting. You can be in a place where people have everything and are unhappy, and you can be in a place where people have nothing and are really happy. And it just got me thinking about like what actually makes people happy, fulfilled in their lives, which is a question that we don't talk about in school or college or anywhere really, right? So I went on to do a master's in East Asian studies to study more about like these technologies, many of which stem out of the East Asian traditions, South Asian traditions, and to cultivate a happier, more sovereign state of mind. And I wrote my first book, The Happiness Track. And then, fast forward 10 years later, I had a couple kids and a couple different things I was doing in my life professionally. And it just hit me, I think during the pandemic at some point, that, you can do all the happiness practice in the world, all the well-being practice, but if you're still following for ways of thinking and acting and behaving that are life destructive, self-destructive, that are not life supportive, it doesn't matter how many well-being practices you do, you're still stuck, you're still bound, you're still unhappy, you're still not living at your fullest potential. And so I wanted to spell that out for people and also show, a science-backed way to regain our internal sovereignty, inner freedom. Because, a lot of people have everything and they may be doing all the things, but they're still struggling. And we see that all the time. And I see it in a lot. I teach executives at the Yale School of Management. That's what I do day in, day out. And I see so many people that are highly successful and yet so unhappy on the inside. So this book is it sort of came to me, and it was like it just felt like it was timely.
How do you define sovereignty? And you mentioned reaching our full potential, but I feel like a lot of times if it comes up in context, it's more around like, I've heard it, there's the whole like rabbit hole of the sovereign man, apparently people understanding their rights to such a level that they're not held by like paying taxes and stuff like that. So when I think of sovereignty, that's the first thing that comes up. But how do you define it?
Yeah, so the way that I'm talking about it here is more internal sovereignty. And there are many ways in which our society, our families, our cultures have shaped the way we think about things, and many of those are good, and some of them are harmful. For example, let me give you just a concrete example. Whenever I ask audiences that I'm teaching, how many of you are self-critical? 95% of the people raise their hand. And there's a sense that, okay, well, if I'm self-critical, that leads to self-improvement, right? That's a good thing. But if you look at it from a psychological perspective, self-criticism is self-loathing. It's self-loathing. It's very intense. And now I'm differentiating between self-awareness, which is like, hey, I'm not that great with statistics, versus self-criticism, which is the words people use, that little voice inside their head that puts them down. And, I usually follow up that question with the question, well, think back on the last time you made a really bad mistake or embarrassing mistake. What are the words you use to speak to yourself in that moment? And inevitably, people will say things like, you're such an idiot, and worse, much worse things. In fact, whenever I've taught on Zoom and asked people to actually put it in the chat, it's so heartbreaking to read through the chat and to see the words that people tear themselves up with. And then I usually ask, like, well, what's the difference between you and someone else? Like, what do you say to your best friend who calls you after making a big mistake? And usually they'll be like, oh, you're okay. Everyone makes mistakes. It's no big deal. You've got this. Like, such compassionate, kind words. And I ask, like, well, what's the difference between you and your best friend? There's no difference other than that you live in different bodies, right? There's no difference. And so this is just one example of how we fail to question some of the ways in which we are, for example, treating ourselves. And when you look at the research, self-criticism leads to anxiety, depression, fear of failure, and less willingness to try again. The opposite of resilience. Right? And we want people to show up resilient. Our planet needs us all to show up as resilient. And yet research shows that if you have a life supportive relationship with yourself, which is a fundamental of having inner sovereignty, is a relationship with yourself um, that is the same kind of relationship you would have with your best friend. And yet seems so foreign in our culture. Research shows that you not only have better mental health, you have better physical health, you have better relationships, because oftentimes if we're really harsh on ourselves, we're also really harsh on the people we love the most and want to hurt the least. It trickles down, but that's just one example of the ways in which, without realizing, we bind ourselves into a situation in which we are less than what we show up as less than what we could, and we are less happy than we could. And most people have this program running in their head without even realizing. Does that make sense?
100%. I just got off my group coaching call with my clients right before this, and I was just reflecting back what you were saying and what we were talking about. And one of my greatest lessons in life is that when I stopped reaching outside of myself to figure out what I needed, I received all the answers. And when I say that, I can think back to my former self where I was frustrated when people would say, you have everything inside of you, or everything that you need is inside of you.
Right.
But as I actually started to live this and opened my awareness to something beyond what I thought that meant, I started to understand like the through lines of, like, for example, a gratitude practice. You can't have a gratitude practice. You can't enhance gratitude in your life by saying, I just need more things to be grateful for. I just need more things to be grateful for, because then you're amplifying the feeling of need, and you're actually giving more attention to this feeling of need and lack that you don't have enough to be grateful for. And so the whole point of a gratitude practice is to find what you have now, to actually feel grateful for that, and then you start to notice more things to be grateful for, and then you start to even attract more things to be grateful for. It's like it explodes. And even that, as I kept with practices like that, I started to realize the reason that is, it's not just the law of attraction, like, oh, I'm feeling grateful for, so now I'm bringing in more things. You can look at it that way. But I started to realize that focusing on gratitude expands my capacity to hold gratitude. And so in expanding my capacity, that's what's really bringing more in. It's like I become greater to hold this. And I've used that same teaching, whether with everything else. It's like when somebody is really triggering to me, have you ever noticed that most often those exact triggers, it's like, why is this person so annoying? They're just so egotistical. And it's usually something that I also have within myself, and I'm rejecting it so much. And so when I'm triggered by somebody else, I now see it as like, okay, this is very triggering. But what if this is a gift? What if this is shining a light on something that I have a deep aversion to? Like, I don't like this. I don't like when people are selfish. I don't like when people think they know it all. Am I never selfish? Do I never think I know it all? It's like shining lights on the areas that we are self-rejecting. And so the only way to fully heal is to expand our capacity to hold all of these things, to give love in light of these things. So anyways, I was going on a whole mental tangent as you were telling that story.
I love that though, because you have become so sovereign. And that's what I talk about in the relationships chapter of the book is exactly that. Relationships, a sovereign perspective on, a balanced. So I contrast the bound state versus the sovereign state. A bound state is taking our finger and pointing it at other people and blaming them for this, that, and the other. And a sovereign state is recognizing that relationships are often, not always, not always, but often a reflection of our own selves, if you see them as mirrors. And again, I'm not making excuses for like abusive behavior or anything like that. But for myself, I'll share personal example that I was in an abusive relationship about 15 years or so ago. And it was a direct reflection of my own relationship with myself. It was a mirror, and our relationships often are mirrors. And that's why oftentimes we'll find repeat patterns. Oh, this is happening to me in my romantic relationship, but it's also happening to me in my work relationship. And it's also happening with my child. What's going on? Well, is it those people? Or is it that we haven't learned the lesson, the boundaries, whatever it was? So it's such a sovereign observation that you made.
You know what's funny? We spend so much time feeding our minds, reading books, listening to podcasts, learning new things, but then we grab whatever's convenient to feed our bodies. And I get it. Life is busy, and sometimes a drive-through feels like the only option. But that's why I take Field of Greens. It's a greens powder made with whole organic fruits and vegetables. No extracts, no lab-made stuff, and just 1 scoop a day gives you simple, real nutrition. Field of Greens feeds your body with fruits and vegetables medically chosen to support your heart, vital organs, and immune system. And let me tell you something. Since I started taking it, I've noticed these little changes that show me how nutrient depleted I must have been before. Like the ridges in my nails, gone. My sleep, so much better. And my stomach just feels happy. You know that dreaded afternoon crash that has you reaching for more coffee or sugary snacks? Well, that's not happening for me anymore. When your body is actually nourished, it runs so much better. I've tried other greens powders before, but Field of Greens is genuinely different. The quality is next level, and you can taste it. It's become my go-to, especially on those days when my eating isn't exactly Instagram worthy, because we all have those days, right? And here's the thing. They are so confident that you'll love it too, that they offer a 100% money-back guarantee. That's how much they believe in their product. So I got you 15% off your first order and free rush shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code MINDLOVE. That's promo code MINDLOVE at fieldofgreens.com. fieldofgreens.com. I don't know why it took me so long to invest in good bedding. I resisted it for years, but something flipped in me about 3 years ago. And now I'm basically a pillow connoisseur. I've tried them all, and I get weirdly excited about good bedding. Because here's the thing, we spend a third of our lives in bed, and the quality of that time affects literally everything else, which is why I'm so excited to tell you about my latest obsession, Lagoon Sleep Pillows. What sets them apart is their matching system. You take a quick 2-minute quiz about your sleep style and your preferences, and then they match you with your perfect pillow. I was matched with their Otter pillow, and I am so impressed. Lately, I've just needed more support, and this seems to cradle me in all the right places. I'm also low-key obsessed with their travel pillow, which I use for way more than just travel. I actually hug it, use it as leg support, and of course, take it on trips with me. Well, the secret is in their adjustable fill. You can add or remove it to get that perfect alignment for your spine. A study even found that the right supportive pillow can improve sleep quality by 63%. And Lagoon lets you try their matched pillow for 100 nights risk-free. Free returns, no questions asked. Falling asleep has never been easier. I toss and turn less and just wake up feeling refreshed every morning. Go to lagoonsleep.com and take their awesome 2-minute sleep quiz to find your match. Use the code MIND for 15% off your first purchase. It was more of an emotionally abusive relationship. And I found it so fascinating how I could see little aspects of my behavior that were being reflected right back to me in like an extreme sense through him. And so I totally know what you mean. And it's a touchy subject because you can't just go to the masses, and it's like you have to be very careful of your words because people will interpret it as like, you caused this, you weren't joyful enough to not be abused. And it's just, that's not what it is. But when we really understand the intricacies, I remember looking at relationships when I was younger, and I didn't realize how low my self-worth is. I just thought that, the way to to make a man interested in me, for example, was I was kind of promiscuous for a period of time. I didn't know how to say no because I was worried that if I said no, it would
interrupt his momentum toward me, or I don't know what. Like in my mind, it's like, well, then I don't know. I'll get him with this, and then he'll realize how great my personality is, like, or something like that. And I would see certain friends who just had this confidence, and they would just be able to say like, no, I don't do this on the first date, or this is moving too fast. And I remember the amount of times that I would sit there and just have like wonder for that person. And I didn't realize until later on that that is what it looks like to exude your worth on the outside. It doesn't have to be with those exact circumstances, but I was coming to relationships from a place of need, and how can I like bring them in and then like really show them this is cool versus like this is what I deserve, this is what I stand for, and who is right for me is going to be able to see me for who I am. I'm going to see them for who they are. And we're going to attract on a level that's different than just the carnal pleasure after tequila shots at 4 a.m. in a frat house, you know?
It's so true. And I love what you said, that it is a very delicate subject, and we're not victim blaming at all. There are many situations of abuse that are nothing to do with that. But I was just sharing from my own perspective. If I was honest with myself, I could clearly see what was going on. But yeah, relationships are great mirrors, especially when they trigger us, right? Like you said. So, and that one aspect, so a key aspect of sovereignty is this idea of awareness, like awareness. Oh, I'm aware of how I'm treating myself. I'm going to deprogram that. We're going to shift that, where I'm aware that these triggers that I'm receiving in my relationship are a reflection of something within me that I'm rejecting. I love how you put that. So that's like, so it's so key.
When you consider, can you illustrate, for example, how someone would see maybe the same things within themselves? Maybe it's an area that could be optimized. What is the difference in handling it with self-criticism versus approaching that with self-awareness?
Yes.
Like, play it out.
I'll give another personal example. I share it in the book. I think I opened the book with this story, in fact. I give keynotes at conferences, and I was slated to give a keynote on a Saturday morning. I don't usually work on Saturdays, and this was planned for 6 months, and I was going to do it on Zoom. And that morning, my husband wasn't feeling well. I took the kids to the park an hour from my home, and then I got a text message, "Are you having trouble logging on the conference?" I had forgotten about it, and there's no way I was going to get home on time. So in that moment, I felt full body shame, like full, like you're wearing out shame, like a whole, like a bodysuit. And there was nothing I could do. Now, there's two ways of going about this, right? One is self-criticism and just sort of beating yourself up. How could you do this? You always do this. You're such a blah, 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 blah. That negative spiral that goes nowhere fast except hell. And the other option, more of the sort of self-compassion route, which I've been teaching and studying for years, is being aware. And I was aware, and I was painfully aware of that shame, and I was feeling it. And I wasn't trying to block it, and I wasn't trying to do anything other than, of course, get home. I recorded a talk. I sent it to them. I asked them to cancel my honorarium, all those things, of course. But I didn't take it further. Isn't the emotion itself hard enough? Do we need to also be beating ourselves up? If someone walked in the room right now and they were armed and they looked dangerous and they looked aggressive, it would be scary. If a terrorist walked in, it would set our fight or flight system into play, right? Our sympathetic nervous system. But when you have like an inner terrorist who's always beating yourself up, you're activating your sympathetic nervous system. You're activating your own stress response. And that just, life is stressful enough. Let's not also do that, right? So sovereignty is being able to feel the feels, which is another thing, by the way, we could talk about, because that's what most people don't want to feel anything bad. And just going through it with courage and awareness, but not adding fuel to the fire. And then after I recorded the talk and after I did all that and sent it on, I asked myself, what do I need right now? And I went and took a nap. That's what I needed. And so that's one thing, one additional tool I love to share is that, self-criticism asks, are you good enough? Like perhaps in your early romantic relationships, that was a thing with those partners where you felt like you had to go beyond maybe what you would have wanted to do. Because am I good enough? Am I good enough? So many of us have asked ourselves these questions. Am I a good enough parent? Am I good enough? This, that, the other, right? But self-compassion asks, what's good for me right now? What's good for me right now? So in that sense, okay, oftentimes the experience is bad enough. We feel bad enough, right? If we failed or something. So what can we do to nurture ourselves? And see what that does is it triggers the opposite of the fight or flight. So the inner terrorist, the self-criticism activates your fight or flight. But what's good for me? Like going to take that nap or going to take the walk, or whatever it is, or a snack, whatever it is that you need in that moment. That's nurturing. It's the opposite. You're reprogramming your brain to have a more sovereign relationship, which is a life supportive relationship with yourself.
I think that's so important to acknowledge is you're programming your brain either way.
That's right.
So often people are like, oh, yeah, I'll do the work later. And it's like, well, you're not staying where you are by continuing to do what you're doing. You're actually deepening those neural pathways and those response systems. I love what James Clear says. Every action is a vote for who you want to become. And so you're not putting off your growth. You're voting for the person that you already know you want to evolve out of over and over and over again, the longer that you wait. And so I love that question. The differentiation is this action asking if I'm good enough, like trying to prove my worth, or is it actually tuning in with yourself and asking what you need? Because it's the difference between reaching outside and saying, consistently training yourself to say, who should I be in this moment? Who does everyone else need me to be? Who do I think I have to be? Versus how can I just show up fully myself and actually be able to tune in and connect to that inner guidance constantly? So I'm not always stressed out trying to read the room. And instead I'm just reading myself. And every time I make a decision, I'm building that connection within myself so that instead of it being so hard and you have to sit there for 10 minutes to figure it out, it becomes this constant guidance of leaning into what your own needs are in that very moment, which is like the ultimate act of self-compassion.
I love that so much. And I direct the women's leadership program at the Yale School of Management. And so I have the privilege of accompanying these cohorts of talented women leaders several times a year. And, one of the exercises we do is we have them do something called the reflective best self, which is when they ask for feedback, but it's not the usual feedback where you are asking for, your 360 or, areas of opportunity for all the sort of negative aspects, but you're asking only for the positive. So you're asking, when did I show up as my best self? What are my strengths? And it is so hard for people to ask for that. And then it's hard for them to read it. Also, they often end up crying reading it because they feel like it's like a eulogy. It's so touching. But I often ask, would you be more comfortable asking for negative feedback? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, why? Like, how does that make sense? It doesn't make any sense, but that's why it's like a program. It's like we're so conditioned to be disconnected from ourselves as opposed to connecting in and nurturing. It's like an ancestral program almost, to the point where it just feels so weird to people, And yet I love Maya Angelou's quote, which is, I learned a long time ago that the wisest thing I can do is to be on my own side. I love her quote. And then I also love Audre Lorde's quote, self-described gay Black woman in a straight white man's world. She was an activist and a playwright and a lot of amazing things. And she said, self-care is not self-indulgence. It's an act of political warfare. Isn't that powerful? It's like, how are you going to show up on the battlefield of your life? Are you going to show up limping because you kicked yourself on the way there? Or are you going to show up in brand spanking new armor because you loved your way there?
I love that. I always come back to the idea that the energy that you're in is the energy that you're sharing if you're creating anything. And so it's like, and it's how I don't like the toxic positivity movement where any feelings are bad.
Right.
But I am aware of what feelings I create within. And so if I'm going out there and sharing in the world, like, yes, I have my people that help me process and whatever, but those are the people who've like had an agreement to create space for certain things with me. But it's more about like the feeling, the releasing. And when I think about myself as like, as the energy. And when I think about myself as the energy, it's so much easier to have any sort of compassion, because then it's just like, well, what does this energy need? Like if I'm just picturing myself as this glowing ball, maybe I'm angry and it condenses and it's this little targeted red arrow kind of, and it's like, you can carry that around and point the blame to everything else and say what everybody else needs. But like, you're the one that needs to transform here. That's what you're carrying. The anger is a hot coal, expecting someone else to get burned type thing. But then if you even take it further and consider that energy never dies, it just evolves. When you die, say you're leaving your little energy ball here. What are you leaving? Did you work your entire life to figure out how to amplify and build up this energy to be like this big golden light of love? Or did you carry around shame and self-criticism and you just hardened it to this little black ball that now the earth has to deal with after you die?
Wow.
I know it's like, it's kind
I
of
love that.
I had just
Yes.
redefined what legacy really means. I was taking my coaching clients through this, and so often we're like thinking, oh, I need to build my legacy, and we stress ourselves out trying to like build something concrete that's gonna disintegrate anyways eventually, because everything does. What if
Yes.
you looked at your legacy as the energy that you carried and
Yes.
taught yourself to transmute and build up and affect the entire planet with ripples of love?
I love that so much. I love that so much. And that's absolutely gorgeous and absolutely true too. Makes my think of a lot of different things. I mean, one of the things, you were saying that people, the whole toxic positivity thing, and people don't want to feel bad, but as a consequence, it's really interesting to me because no matter how educated you are, no matter how much whatever culture you have, we don't get trained in how to handle our negative emotions. So most people are running around with as much training about what to do with their big bad negative emotions as a 5-year-old, just not wanting to feel the bad. And I think that's why there's so much addiction, and you don't have to be an alcoholic to be an addict. You can be addicted to your phone, you could be addicted to your work, you could be addicted to exercising, you could be addicted to weed or doom scrolling, or I mean, there are so many ways to be addicted that doesn't look like it's a problem, but it's just a way of not feeling. So, yeah, it made me think of that, and then the other thing is the whole energy thing. I mean, there's all this research now on positively energizing leadership. I talk about that in the relationships chapter. So I love that you brought that up because okay, I'll start with the story. I had to share a story. So my friend Itel, she's a human rights and environmental lawyer, and an activist, and she'll go and do investigations in like the jungles of Africa or South America and find companies that are doing deforestation for their rubber companies or chocolate companies or whatever. So she goes in there and she does investigations. And then when she was doing one of these, suddenly her car and her driver disappeared. And she was told, get in this car with these people. And it was these 2 muscle strapped guys in military apparel that looked threatening. And she knew that the government of that country was getting kickbacks from the rubber company so that they could do all their deforestation that they wanted to do. And that they didn't want my friend to tell there because she was causing trouble, right? So here she is. She's got to get back to the airport. It's 3 hours away. She's in the middle of the jungle, and that she doesn't have any other choice but get in this car. And in the span of the 3 hours she was in the car with those guys, she turned her would-be hitmen into her protectors. They brought her all the way to the airport, and she got confirmation that they were supposed to kill her at the end when they were like, do not ever come back here. You're not safe. But if you do come back, come over a land border and under our protection and stay with us. How do you manage such a miracle? Itel has something called positively energizing. She's like positively energizing leadership, which I'll go into the science of that. But and again, I'm not saying that anyone who's been held hostage who hasn't been able to get out doesn't have this, but she's just really exemplifies it. So some of my colleagues looked at companies and saw that within certain sections of the companies, there were this like super productivity. I was like, what's going on? Why is this group so productive? They always found there was one person at the center, I remember my colleague saying to me, Emma, it's embarrassing to use this word, but all I can say is that they have like this positive energy in the sense that they have this life-giving energy, and they're creating all this creativity and work around them. They're having that kind of life supportive energy. And I think we all know what it feels like to be around an energy vampire where we feel like depleted after. But the opposite is also true. You can be a positive energizer. And that is one of the keys to highly successful relationships. So I love that you brought up that analogy because, we can go around our day with an intention to be there for others, to uplift others, even if it's just with a smile or a nice comment, right? It doesn't have to be complicated or not. But when we do that, we create this ripple effect of life around us. But get this, what the research shows is it's not just the people and those people enliven others, but through those interactions, they re-enliven themselves. So it's an energy cycle that doesn't deplete, just like physical energy depletes, right? Then you have to go to sleep, or emotional energy, you can get depleted, but not through this positive relational energy. It's very powerful. And Etel beautifully exemplifies this. And yes, I just had to share that given the beautiful comment you just shared.
We're so in these bubbles of really it's conditioning. I honestly believe that to be our best possible selves, we need to break every single paradigm that the earth has given us. That is what my program helps people to do, 1 week at a time. But we actually are so focused on this idea of time management. And so when somebody is stuck in a life that they hate, they're sitting there, but I don't have any time to figure out something else. And I need this because I have bills to pay and blah, blah, blah. But the secret I've found is that it's not about time management. It's about energy management. And when you start to, first of all, understand what's giving and depleting your energy, you unlock a whole new level of existence, and your concept of time even changes. It's why when you're in flow or like playing an instrument or playing a sport, you lose all concept of time. You experience it on a different level. It doesn't feel so contracted either. You lost yourself in it. And also, I believe that you tap into the universal current. And so, yes, at the end of your day job that you hate, you're exhausted. But at the end of a day where I am leaning into my passion and my purpose, and instead of figuring out me, and how do I make something of myself in the world, and instead I'm like, I have this vision of divine perfection out there of what the world is looking like when it all is working together cohesively towards one big vision, and I am playing my highest part in it, and I just open to that instead of what I think that should look like. It's like I'm constantly guided and I don't get tired. I'm just fed energy because I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And it doesn't need to be like, oh, I'm creating a whole movement that changes the world. It could be that I am smiling at the person next to me in the grocery store that looks like they need a little bit of compassion, that I'm choosing, as they say in yoga, namaste. The divine in me is acknowledging and therefore activating the divine in both of us, or the love in both of us. That which we give is what we receive. That's the secret, where we're always looking like, what can I get? But it's like, okay, well then what do you need to give so that you can feel that? Just like being in love, the other person doesn't hold your love, you feel it. And that person's activating it. And that's how you need to be living in the tapestry of this universe. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh my gosh, no, I love it. It's so true. It's so true. And I think what I'm always trying to do is, this is such advanced thinking. And I'm, as a psychologist and scientist, I'm always just trying to help open up people's awareness about that. And because, we live in a time when it's really all about science all the time. But there is what you're sharing, all the beautiful things you're sharing is now substantiated by science, And so it's just beautiful. I love what you said. And it's so, so true. It doesn't deplete that when you're living in that kind of feeling of purpose. And like you said, it doesn't have to be huge. It can be just, let me smile at that person. They look like they're having a hard day. And maybe that's the first smile they'll get all day,
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Time to move? Skip the hassles of selling during the holiday season and sell your home directly to Opendoor. Request an all-cash offer in minutes, close, and get paid in days. You can even pick your close date so you can move after New Year's. Start your move at opendoor.com or download the Opendoor app. Opendoor is represented by Opendoor Brokerage Inc., license 02061130 in California, and Opendoor Brokerage LLC in its other markets. Terms and conditions apply.
And if you're listening to this and it's just like, okay, yeah, that's all good and well, but it doesn't resonate with me, I'm still surviving, I get that. It's just like when you read a book and you think you got everything out of it, you read every word, and then you go back and read it 2 years later when you're in a different place and you get something completely different out of it. These teachings exist and they will mean something different to you as you progress through your life and evolve your way of thinking. And so I want to meet some people where they are because I love the concept of sovereignty, and I fully relate to, like, looking back, I can see how I was just living in a bound state, as you call it. And I was subject to so much outside of myself because of that external validation. And one of the things that you teach is that that external validation actually makes people vulnerable to manipulation and control. And boy, do I know this. I lived and breathed this, but I'd love for you to explain that to people so they can potentially see if that is something that is occurring.
Well, why don't you share an example of how you experienced it? And then I'd love to go into the science of it.
I recognized a time in my life where I always kind of just moved around. Like when things would get hard, I would move. And it was easier than dealing with conflict, or when I realized things weren't as they should, I'm like, let me just start all over. But what I learned through that from moving, like being in college and then going to Texas, then going to Palm Desert, then LA, I have a lot of groups of friends in totally different places. Whereas like my husband grew up and had the same friends. And so one would come and go, and it was, but the main core thing. And so he was just kind of him moving through it all. Whereas I was like, oh, I'm in a whole new place with whole new people in a whole new state. And I would find myself dressing differently and liking different things. And it's interesting because at the time I would have told you, I don't really change around people. Like I thought I was still just myself, but I wasn't. I was trying to be what I thought would make me likable. And so that goes back to even my like promiscuity phase. I look back, some of the things I said during that phase, like I had a lot of really close guy friends and I wanted to be like the cool girl. And so I was not a girl's girl for a while at all. I didn't understand. I would say things like, here's a inappropriate example. But I remember actually telling people, my guy friends at a time, one of my guy friends was dating a girl and she said she had never orgasmed through intercourse. And I like fully had a conversation with him and all of our guy friends shaming her. Like, oh my God, I would hate to be with that girl, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, at that time, I had never had an orgasm through intercourse. Like, just fully lied because I didn't want to be the one that made a man feel like not a man. Meanwhile, I am sacrificing my ability to ever have an orgasm with a guy because I'm not sitting there saying, this isn't working for me. Let's try something else. So that was a really raw example, but there's one for you.
No, absolutely. And the sister of a friend of mine, she had a really, really bad illness, and she was told she needed to change her lifestyle in order to feel better. And she decided not to because she didn't want to look normal. And that just goes to show, wow, like you would prefer to look normal than to save your own life, And I think it goes back to this idea of just, like you said, just wanting to be accepted. I often, this thought came in my head just last week. I was thinking, behind every perfectionist or high achiever is an experience of conditional love, right? At one point you learned, I will only be loved if. right? We can learn that very young as a kid, right? And with that means that you go through your life shape shifting into anything that you think others will accept. And in the process, you're sacrificing your own self. And, even here at Yale, just to get into Yale is so hard, right? All these undergraduates, when they're asked what emotion do you most feel, you would think they're feeling elated and they're feeling successful. Nope, they're feeling stressed and tired. And when you ask them what they want to feel, guess what they want to feel?
Peace and love.
They want to feel loved. And it's so, and this pattern I've seen in all like high achieving environments. No amount of acceptance or love from others will make up and repair the hole in your heart from a lack of love from yourself. There's only one person who can do that, and that's you. So that's just one example. Excuse me, Monica. And I think probably all of us have experienced, adapting our behavior to a certain extent for our environment, just to be polite. But if it goes to the point where you are sacrificing what you want, what you believe in for others, it's really tragic. And about 70% of people on their deathbed regret not living the life they wanted to live. So sovereignty is really tuning in. Yeah, you don't want to go against all rules of society and get yourself in jail or, but if you are not honoring your own self and your own individuality, which is so beautiful and brings to the planet something so unique. Everyone is so unique. Like when they, if you don't give that, allow that full expression, you're robbing the planet, not just yourself, the whole planet of who you are, but also keeping yourself in a balanced state, not in the happiest place you can be, not in the most fulfilled, definitely not at your highest potential.
One of the things the phrases you use are called should imprints. And I love this visual even. I've never heard it called that specific phrase, but it's like I immediately know what it is. Talk about that and how we become imprinted with these.
Yeah, this idea that we should be like this or, or should not be like this. And we learn that growing up. And again, some of it to a certain extent is normal. Like we long to belong. Like that's just very fundamental to us. But if it's to the extent where where you're completely disconnected from yourself to the point you're not even aware of what you want or who you are, or not making room for that, that's just so, if you think about it, it's so like schizophrenic. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in a demeaning way towards anyone with schizophrenia, but I mean, it's you're divorced from yourself. That is probably the most destructive relationship you can have with yourself, but also it's bound to lead to mental health issues. It's bound to lead to depression. It's bound to lead to anxiety because, when you're in an abusive relationship or in a toxic relationship with someone, it's horrible. But when you're in that relationship with yourself, and most people, complain toxic workplace, toxic relationship, but they're in a toxic relationship with themselves as well, oftentimes, and we fail to question that.
I feel like it's on two levels too, where in one level, you're so used to treating yourself that way that you stay in situations because it's familiar. Whereas other people, like, have you ever been in a situation where you watch somebody else just have boundaries and walk out and it's like, I didn't even consider that.
Right.
Like, that's how I feel with so many past relationships where I'm like, instead of trying to be something even better so that they like me more, leave and go find someone who actually acknowledges how amazing I am. And then I do believe that there's a whole spiritual level of it where, we call in the lesson that we need to see. Yeah. And so in that way, even something awful can be a gift if we get the lesson out of it, if we find our worth through it. And that's why, just as you said, we often keep being encountered by very similar situations until we get the lesson. And one of my, I hate when I'm online or something and somebody says something and a bunch of people are like, yes, exactly. And then there's a bunch of people that's like, this is shaming me, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, not every message is meant for every single person. If it's not meant for you, scroll by or say, you know what, I'm not ready for this tone. There's times where a kick in the ass is
exactly what I need. Like, you can't sit down and be like, well, Melissa, I see how you're feeling, but having some structure right now would be good. Sometimes I need, like, I'll like go on a YouTube video and find the masculine energy motivational video that's like, get up out of bed. You want to accomplish your dreams, you need to go for them. It's your responsibility. And other times I'm just not open to that. And I need someone to come sit there, pet my head, and say, now's not the time for getting up at 4 a.m. Now's the time for resting because that's what your soul needs. But there's a time
Love
and
it.
place for all of it. So I just strongly encourage people out there. It's just another one of those moments. It's like, what do I need? Don't blast somebody out there for not giving you exactly what you need. Give it to yourself.
Right.
There's billions of YouTube videos now. Go find a different message that resonates at this core moment instead of trying to get the other one wiped off the internet. That's my tangent for the day.
I love that, and it's so interesting because when you start to meet your own needs and you stop looking for others to meet your needs, and you can show up in your fullness, not that you can't want to be in a relationship or anything, but you stop looking for validation from others, you stop looking for whatever it is you're looking for in others. When you give that to yourself, you fill your own cup, and in so doing, you show up as such a gift to others because you show up with your full expression that you are, your full enthusiasm, your full energy.
And we can also realize that that is what we're all doing the whole time anyways, however it's manifesting. We're all looking to fulfill some sort of need inside of us. Even that super triggering person who, or even when we're looking for external validation, even the boss lashing out, is that how they fulfill their need to feel important? Is that how they think that it's the only way to actually push their will upon the world? Is that us just trying to feel loved? Because I feel like that's what, if you really go to the deepest level, it's
Yeah.
everyone just trying to feel love in whatever way that looks like to them.
Yes.
It makes it a
Yes.
lot easier to have compassion for
Yes.
ourselves and for other people. And then when we realize that, we can look for healthier ways to give that to ourselves. Okay, so instead of going and sleeping around, how else can I feel loved? Maybe I'll just go have a conversation with my mother, or my best friend, or maybe I'll sit there in meditation and focus on amplifying a feeling of love inside of my heart as I scan through every memory of the deepest love I've ever felt. There's so many ways to do it. But I know one of the
Yeah.
things that you talk about is the importance of actually creating quiet time and stepping out of the noise and the distractions to increase our intuition, to enhance our feelings of, or to really just get in touch with that our own voice, because we're so used to listening to all those external sounds. What does that look like for you, or how do you guide people to do that? Because I know it's scary and uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah, we take in over 60,000 gigabytes of information every day across all our media channels, which is enough to crash like a small computer in a week. I mean, it's a lot. We fill our minds with so much stuff, and you got to ask yourself, what are we filling our minds with? How much of it is complete junk, And how much noise, how much can we hear our own inner mind if we're constantly filling it with stuff? Like whatever you watch, the expression "you are what you eat" is also true of your mind, right? Whatever you're stuffing in your mind is what's going to be there. You're stuffing your mind with news, you're going to be feeling stressed and scared and down, right? You fill your mind with porn, that's what you're going to be thinking about. Fill your mind with perfect Instagram accounts, you're going to be thinking, whatever it is. But I think we all know what it feels like to have a gut feeling. And we've all had moments in our life where we've had a gut feeling, which we've either listened to or not listened to, and seen what happens after that. And, my friend Kushal was in one of the Twin Towers during 9/11, and he just arrived at work, and the guard said, everyone stay inside. And his intuition said to run. And he ran, and he saved his life by a hair. And we all, the intuition research shows this. It's an instinct. Animals have this. We have this. We tune into our environments. We tune in. We are receptive. Just, like Einstein would talk about intuition and say that's where he got his best ideas. And it was through listening to music, but it was by listening to that inner voice. And it's also, you can see it in the animal kingdom too. Just to give you a really concrete example, have you ever been around someone where you don't feel comfortable around them, but you can't understand why?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what's happening. So our intellect is actually really slow, and our physiology understands things in a much more rapid way. So let's say I were angry and I was suppressing my anger. So I'm pretending I'm not angry. Like I'm just fine over here, right? Your heart rate would increase. In your head, you wouldn't know why you're not feeling comfortable, but physiologically, your heart rate is increasing, your fight or flight is activated. And what research shows is also with animals. So if you take like a horse and equine facilitated therapy, which is like a therapy with a horse and then a patient, if the patient shows up and they're like, I'm not scared of that horse, but they're actually scared, the horse is anxious, it's moving all over the place. As soon as the person says, I'm scared of the horse calms down. What's going on? The horse doesn't understand English. But physiologically, it has registered inauthenticity and it registers that as threat. And we do the same thing. So you can think of intuition many different ways. One way is that we physiologically resonate with our environment and know what's going on, even though our intellect doesn't know what's going on, right? Like Kushal, his intellect didn't know what was going on, but his body told him run. There was something. But you can also think of intuition as a receptivity. Like that's the way Mozart and other artists like Salvatore Dali, they knew that if they went into that, closed their eyes, and for Mozart, he would listen to Einstein, and Salvatore Dali would just go into that place between sleep and wake to like, that's where his like paintings would come to him. They understand. You could think of intuition as that receiving messages, or someone who's like very more like brain focused will call it, your brain is in active problem solving mode. Whatever, it doesn't really matter how people want to conceive of it. The point is we have an intuition, and it's designed to guide us and save our lives. And what my friend Joe Michaels, who's a neuroscientist, found is that when you're making a complicated decision, you're going to make a better decision if you go with your gut than if you're just thinking it through. If it's a simple decision, it doesn't matter. But if it's a complex one, going with your gut is really going to help you make better decisions. So anyways, in this world that's so noisy, so loud, so much coming at us all the time, it's so easy to never tap into the intuitive state of mind, which comes when our brain is in alpha wave mode. It's not highly focused. It's not on a screen, staring, focusing. It's not so lethargic that it could go to sleep. It's that in-between mode. And that mode, research shows, is when we're most likely to come up with our aha insights, solutions to problems we've been working on. But you can think of them as intuitions, creativity. And it's really powerful. And the way that you can tap into it, meditation is the simplest way, because it puts you in alpha wave mode, but also listening to music, spending time alone without your phone, spending time in nature, those kinds of activities. And in a time that's so busy and so noisy, it's rare to do that, but it's essential so you can have sovereignty and use your intuition. The bound state with regard to your intuition is being constantly just letting yourself be barraged by information all the time and constantly listening to everybody else's opinion and completely being out of touch with yourself.
I'm always telling people, choose your hard, because so many people are like, I just can't get into meditation. I've been trying too much. It's uncomfortable for me. Is your current state comfortable? Like, really catalog your emotions throughout a day. What do you feel a majority of the time? Because if you're not meditating or working on these things, most often it's like dis-ease of some sort. You're triggered, you're upset about this, you're thinking back to this, and that is not comfortable. And so now meditation, it took me a while to get there, but now meditation is like this bliss space that I enter. And when I feel like it's going to be painful, which I still have those moments, I'm just thinking too much, I can't sit down and meditate. I'm like, that's when I need it the most. And it does actually rewire your brain. I remember learning when I was trying to overcome different addictions. One of the books that really helped was by Dr. Judson Brewer. And he talks about how in brain scans, there's our default mode network. And this part of the brain is responsible for things like rumination and worrying, and people that think a lot about the past or the future and are worried, that's activated, but it's also our center of self-referential thinking. So when we're thinking about ourselves, and a lot of times when we think we're worrying, we're not realizing you're thinking about yourself, like that you're enhancing these feelings of yourself. And his way wasn't even just meditation, it was loving kindness meditation, and showed that made the most rapid changes to your brain. There was another study that talks about the wheel of awareness meditation, and it actually changes your brain too. And it's putting these two together is so interesting to me, because
what the wheel of awareness does is it basically like you tune into your body, the inside, then the outside, and you just keep expanding your awareness outward. And it showed by practicing that changed your brain also. It decreased the activity in the amygdala. And it's just interesting to me how in both practices, one is just expanding to see beyond yourself, and one is actually sending positive emotions outside of yourself. Both of these are kind of increasing our feelings of connectivity and unity of all that's around us instead of just me the whole time. And I find that interesting because that also increases your intuition. There was a period of time because of my past that I had a really hard time with my gut instincts because there's a fine line between survival patterns because you've been hurt and that's your first response is to go down, it's because you've been hurt before and you're trying to protect yourself, and actually that knowingness. And so meditation helps to separate those two and create the space between your reactions so you can actually discern between your programming and your pain and what actually is your intuition. And I love that you mentioned Kushal Choksi was, if anyone wants to listen to his episode, which was really powerful, you can go to mindlove.com/x66, but it's a really good listen.
Yeah, no, I love Kushal. Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I always say with meditation, find the shoe that fits. We actually ran a couple of studies on loving kindness meditation in our lab. And I think we ran the first one that was actually came out, and we found that in 7 minutes, we can make people feel more connected to strangers in just a 7-minute practice, getting you out of your own mind. And, when there's trauma, meditation can be very hard at first. And I experienced this myself because I was in New York during 9/11, and it wasn't until I learned the breathing practice that Kushal inevitably talks about in the podcast conversation with you. And it wasn't until I learned that breathing practice, sky breath meditation, that I was able to regain sovereignty over my anxiety. And fast forward 10 years later, I was working with veterans with trauma, and nothing was working for these guys. And so we ran a study looking at the effect of this breathing practice, the sky breath meditation. And it was amazing. A lot of them were bunkered up in their basement, smoking weed and drinking and self-medicating. And they were able to gain sovereignty and move on with their lives. And so, find the shoe that fits. That practice, the sky breath meditation, is particularly good for trauma. And it certainly helped me. And then it allows you to be able to meditate more easily after. So you really have to find what works for you, but definitely keep looking until you find it.
I love leaving listeners with one practice, thought experiment, something that they can focus on and do today to make a reality some of the things that we talked about, so it doesn't just become information that stores in the back of their brain. If you're going to leave them with one little practice or something to think about, what would that be?
Remember, what do I need right now? Every time you feel bad, what do I need right now? And then answer it. If you're taking care of a child or a pet, when they've last been out, when they've last had something to drink, something to eat, whether they're cold or whether they need to sleep, all these things. Do the same for yourself. If you're feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, what do I need right now? Oh yeah, I haven't eaten in 5 hours. That kicks off the fight or flight and stress response. Like, that's normal. Let me eat something to take care of myself. Let me do this, that. So that's one thing. And then, one of those things could also be a breathing exercise. And when you breathe in, your heart rate increases. And when you breathe out, it slows down. So why don't you try 5 minutes breathing in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 8. Guaranteed it's going to slow down your heart rate, trigger your parasympathetic nervous system, make you feel a whole lot better.
This episode is the epitome of taking your power back. And I always love reflecting back on where I was when I first heard certain phrases. And so often I can think when something sounds like bullshit or just esoteric nonsense, and then you start to live it and you start to understand really what it means. And this is exactly what that is. It's like, instead of being subject to everything else and everyone else, you actually have the capacity to be in your calmness and feel in the ways that you intend to feel, and to have, take control of your sovereignty. Just feel sovereign in your life instead of feeling like you're blowing in the wind. So thank you so much for the research from your book. For listeners that want to dive deeper, where can they find you and your book?
Yep, my book is called Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and Chaos. And you can find it anywhere books are sold, Amazon or anywhere. I'm on Instagram at The Happiness Track. I'm also on all the things, YouTube, Facebook, so forth.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/352. Your challenge for this week is to just be more in tune with what you really need. Rather than reacting to whatever's happening, whether we're hangry, whether we're triggered, all the things, take a moment to pause. This habit of pausing in itself is wildly beneficial. But during that pause, ask yourself, what is it that I really need right now? And trust the answer that arises. If that answer has anything to do with somebody else doing something, maybe sit in it a couple more seconds. This is about what you need, how you can fill your own cup, how you can begin reparenting yourself, responding to your needs in a more powerful way. And I call it powerful because, like we talked about in the beginning, if we are always requiring somebody else to do something for us to reach peace, we are not empowered. That is the opposite of sovereignty. Suddenly, our moods, our well-being is all at the whim of what somebody else is or is not willing to do. So practice this. Let this be your go-to whenever anything happens. It can change your entire life. If you would like help getting in touch with that true inner voice, really figuring out what it is that you want out of this life, this is the perfect time. Soul Strength Activation is launching for the second time. The first group was such an incredible experience, and now I have dozens of testimonials to show you of people saying things like, "This whole program has been unlike any other experience. I've stepped into the realization that I am a powerful creator, and everything else has just come together to remind me that I don't have to be overwhelmed by all the things. All I need to do is sit centered in the focus of what it is I really want." That's from Nicole. Another amazing testimonials from Caitlin, who says, "It's like I'm experiencing a whole new level of existence in myself. I truly feel like I've peeled away a layer or several of who I thought I was. I'm more prepared to step back and remember I am capable of so much." Or from Jason, who says, "I'm roughly 8 weeks into Soul Strength Activation, and I'm beaming with euphoric joy because I've been able to structure and understand my life in a way that I never thought possible. When I started, I was simply wanting to feel well. Now I want so much more. I'm taking a journey every day now versus blindly walking through life." And those are just some of them. If you'd like to see the whole lot of testimonials, how people experienced years worth of change in just a couple months' time, please reach out to me. We'll get on a call. We'll talk about if it's right for you. You can find all of my amazing sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors, and a previously sold out room in our retreat just opened up. So check it out at mindlove.com/retreat. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.